The order from the Council. I never had a choice. From the moment I entered service in the Dominion's Observation Corps, my life was not my own. Orders came down from the Council of Elders, and I obeyed. My species, the Karath, prided itself on efficiency, obedience, and cold logic. To disobey was unthinkable, punishable not only by disgrace but by exile from the very collective that defined our existence. So when I was summoned before the Council and told I would be dispatched to observe humanity, I bowed my head and accepted. Outwardly, I remained calm. Inwardly, I burned with questions. Why humans? Of all the countless species in the galaxy, why assign me to such a primitive, short-lived race? The Elder's explanation was clinical, stripped of any trace of fear or admiration. Humanity is unpredictable. Their combat patterns defy conventional models. Previous encounters have yielded unsatisfactory outcomes. Your task is to witness them in conflict, document their methods, and return with empirical data. No interference. No judgment. Only observation. It sounded simple. Almost too simple. I studied what little we knew of them during the voyage to the contested colony world of Branthose 4. The archives described humans as fragile, their bodies inefficient compared to other species. Their muscle-to-mass ratio was unimpressive, their bones brittle, their lifespans insultingly brief. They relied heavily on external tools, machines, weapons, armor, to compensate for what nature had denied them. And yet, history told a different story. The Dominion had fought dozens of skirmishes with humans over the last century. In each, our fleets were technologically superior. In each, our soldiers were better trained. And in each, the humans resisted far longer than predicted. Entire campaigns had collapsed because human forces refused to surrender, even when outnumbered, even when surrounded, even when annihilation was certain. It did not make sense. The numbers should have favored us. I dismissed it as chance, anomaly, or exaggeration. Numbers did not lie. But even so, I remembered the words of an old commander I once overheard in the mess hall. His face was crisscrossed with scars, his eye replaced by a crude cybernetic implant. He spoke in a low tone to his peers, unaware of my presence. "Never corner a human," he muttered. "Never give them nothing left to lose. If you do, you'll see what they really are." His companions laughed, dismissing him as a relic of failed campaigns. I laughed too, though nervously. At the time, I thought him senile, still haunted by old defeats. But those words would return to me later, etched into my memory like a wound that never heals. My shuttle descended through Branthose 4's choking atmosphere, guided by coordinates that marked the last stronghold of human resistance. From above, the planet looked like a wound, blackened forests, shattered cities, rivers clogged with wreckage. The Dominion had already written this world off as a victory. It was only a matter of time before the remaining humans were wiped away. I expected silence, despair, the hollow aftermath of inevitable defeat. Instead, I found fire. The human encampment clung stubbornly to the edge of a ruined city. Their walls were little more than welded scrap, their weapons a patchwork of scavenged technology. Yet the air thrummed with energy, not fear. I saw soldiers sharpening blades and calibrating rifles with steady hands. I saw engineers repairing broken drones with nothing but spare wires and determination. I saw children carrying supplies, their faces streaked with dirt but their eyes burning with the same defiance as the adults. And I heard something that unsettled me more than any weapon: laughter. It drifted from groups huddled around fires, from soldiers cleaning their weapons, from medics bandaging wounds. They laughed in the face of annihilation, as if war itself were a cruel joke and they refused to be its punchline. I recorded everything, my lens capturing their movements, their expressions, their voices. My duty was to collect data, not to interpret it. But even as I observed, I felt an unfamiliar unease coiling in my chest. That night, I was invited, no, ordered, by a human commander to sit among them. They knew I was not one of them, though I concealed my species beneath layers of armor and cloaking fields. Perhaps they thought I was just another soldier from one of their distant colonies. Perhaps they simply didn't care. They spoke of the battles they had fought, of comrades lost, of victories carved from impossible odds. They joked about their hardships, mocked their enemies, even teased one another with a casual intimacy that my people would have found undisciplined, even shameful. And then one soldier, his arm bound in a crude sling, looked at me and grinned. "First time in the fire?" he asked. I did not answer. But something in his tone, in his ease, unsettled me. That night, as I lay awake listening to the sounds of distant bombardments and human laughter echoing through the ruined city, I realized this mission would not be simple. For the first time in my career, I felt something more than duty. I felt fear. And though I did not yet understand it, I also felt the first sting of regret. Into the furnace of war. The war was already a living thing when I arrived, an endless roar of fire and steel that devoured everything in its path. Brant Hose 4 was not just a battlefield. It was a graveyard in motion. Cities lay in ruins, their towers shattered into jagged teeth that clawed at the sky. Forests burned endlessly, turning the horizon into a smear of smoke. The very air carried the bitter tang of scorched metal, plasma discharge, and blood. I was meant to observe from a distance, recording human behavior from the safety of my cloaked vantage. But humans had a way of dragging others into their orbit. Before long, I found myself walking among them, a shadow that was supposed to remain detached. Their defenses were crude, trenches hacked into soil, barricades of twisted steel, gun turrets cobbled together from enemy wreckage. Yet there was an energy in the camp that unsettled me. Not resignation, not despair, but something harder, sharper. A will that refused to break. I expected fear. Instead, I heard laughter. In one trench, a group of soldiers shared a joke so obscene even I, who only partially understood their language, could sense its vulgarity. They laughed until tears streamed down their faces, then rose as the alarm sounded and ran to their positions with grim efficiency. The laughter never seemed to fade, it clung to them like armor. I began recording patterns. Morale, high, despite staggering losses. Discipline, loose, bordering on chaotic, yet effective. Tactics, improvised, constantly shifting, unnervingly adaptive. But data did not capture what I felt as I followed them into the field. The first battle I witnessed was small by Dominion standards, a skirmish over a ruined fuel depot. Enemy forces struck hard and fast, descending in sleek dropships, their armor gleaming under the ashen sky. The humans met them head-on. I expected them to scatter. Instead, they roared. The sound still haunts me, a chorus of rage that shook the very ground. They charged not in neat formations but as a tide, each soldier acting with brutal independence yet somehow in concert. Plasma fire tore through their lines, shredding bodies, but those who fell were dragged aside while others surged forward. I remember one soldier, barely more than a boy, his arm seared to uselessness. He grabbed a fallen comrade's rifle with his remaining hand and kept firing until the barrel glowed. Another, missing half his leg, strapped explosives to his chest and hurled himself into an enemy walker. The explosion turned the machine into a collapsing inferno, and the humans cheered as though it were victory itself. I should have felt disgust. Instead, I felt my stomach twist with something I did not yet name, awe. The enemy commander, confident in superior numbers and firepower, expected a swift rout. Instead, their formation fractured. Humans fought like water, flowing around obstacles, adapting instantly to shifts in battle. A barricade destroyed. They built a new one from rubble. A tactic countered. They abandoned it without hesitation and invented another. The depot was theirs within hours. The enemy withdrew, leaving behind wreckage and confusion. That night, the humans celebrated not with feasts or ceremony, but with stories. Around fires in the trenches, they spoke of the battle with laughter, mocking the enemy's arrogance, teasing one another for mistakes, praising their fallen with crude humor rather than solemnity. I sat silently among them, recording every word. One woman noticed me watching. Her face was scarred, her uniform burned in places, her eyes sharp as blades. She leaned close, her voice low. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Don't worry. You'll get used to it." I almost asked her what it was, but I already knew. It was this unshakable refusal to yield, this transformation of pain into fuel, of despair into laughter. Later, in the quiet hours, I reviewed my recordings. The data was inconsistent with all Dominion models. By every calculation, the humans should have lost. Their weapons were inferior, their numbers too small, their defenses makeshift. And yet, they had won. Why? The answer would not fit neatly into charts or equations. It was something intangible, something my people had never understood. The next days only deepened the mystery. I followed them into more battles, a desperate ambush in a crumbling city street, a brutal defense of a collapsing bridge, a night raid on an enemy supply convoy. Each time, they should have failed. Each time, they adapted. I saw a squad cornered in an alley turn broken furniture into barricades and wine bottles into firebombs. I saw a medic, unarmed and covered in blood, stab an enemy soldier with a scalpel rather than abandon her patient. I saw civilians, farmers, mechanics, even children, pick up weapons and join the fight as though it were the most natural thing in the world. They never fought clean. They never fought fair. And they never stopped. But the most unsettling thing was how they fought together. Not in rigid formations like Dominion soldiers, but with trust so instinctive it defied reason. A soldier would fire blindly into smoke, confident a comrade would move at the right moment. A squad would scatter without orders, knowing instinctively how to regroup. It was chaos, yet it was order. A paradox I could not unravel. One evening, after a particularly brutal clash, I stood on a ridge overlooking the battlefield. The ground was littered with bodies, human and alien alike. Fires burned in the ruins. The air was thick with smoke and ash. And yet, in the distance, I heard singing. A group of human soldiers marched back to camp, their voices rising in rough, imperfect harmony. The song was old, their language thick with words I didn't understand. But the meaning was clear. It was not a song of victory. It was not even a song of mourning. It was a song of defiance. I turned off my recorder. For the first time, I realized I was no longer just an observer. I was a witness. And deep inside me, something shifted. This was not the weakness I had been told to expect. This was not the fragility I had studied in reports. This was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. Fury unleashed. The siege of Brant-Hose Ridge was meant to be the end. The Dominion had committed everything: orbital bombardments, waves of shock troops, armored walkers, and weapons forbidden by treaties older than humanity itself. By every calculation, the ridge should have been erased from existence in a matter of hours. The Council expected victory reports within the day. But calculations mean nothing in the face of human fury. I stood on the ridge when the first bombardment struck. The earth split apart, trenches collapsing into flaming craters. Whole squads vanished in flashes of plasma fire. The sky burned with descending craft, their engines shrieking like hungry predators. And yet, no one surrendered. The humans fought like creatures possessed. They carried the wounded from craters, set broken bones with field dressings, and threw themselves back into the fray as if the bombardment had been nothing more than a passing storm. The enemy advanced in gleaming formations, their armor reflecting the fires around them. Humans answered with mud and grit. Farmers hurled sharpened tools, children carried ammunition, medics turned syringes into weapons when their patients were threatened. It was madness. It was impossible. And it was working. I remember one moment with piercing clarity. A human commander, half her body scorched black from plasma burns, refused to be carried from the line. She stood on the ridge, rifle in one hand, flag in the other, screaming orders through the smoke. Every soldier who saw her surged forward with renewed strength, as if her burning body was a beacon brighter than the enemy's fire. She should have died within minutes. She lasted hours. The enemy grew desperate. They unleashed their walkers, towering machines of metal and death, bristling with cannons and shredding anything in their path. I felt my stomach drop. Surely, this would break the humans. Instead, I saw fury take form. Squads swarmed the walkers like insects, climbing their armored legs, prying open maintenance hatches with bare hands. Soldiers strapped explosives to themselves, hurling their bodies against steel. Others dragged cables across the battlefield, tripping machines that weighed more than fortresses. When one walker fell, the humans cheered like gods themselves had been slain. The enemy responded with toxin gas, choking the trenches with poison. Humans tore off their masks to share them with children, with the wounded, with one another. I saw men and women stumble into fire, lungs burning, but still fighting long enough to strike a final blow. And still, the line held. It was then I realized what the old veterans had meant. This was not simple bravery. This was not mere defiance. It was something deeper, older, a rage that consumed reason, that transformed weakness into strength, that refused to accept reality itself. Humans did not merely fight. They endured. By nightfall, the ridge should have fallen. Instead, the invaders faltered. Their formations wavered. For every human body that fell, 2 more seemed to rise from the ashes, screaming vengeance. The enemy began to retreat, not in strategy, but in panic. I followed a squad into the heart of the battle. They carried only half their weapons. The rest had jammed or burned away. And yet, their eyes burned brighter than any weapon I had ever seen. One soldier, bleeding from a dozen wounds, looked at me through the smoke. His face was pale, lips trembling, yet his voice cut like thunder. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them what we are." Then he charged into the enemy line and vanished in a storm of fire. The ridge was a graveyard by dawn. Bodies lay stacked in heaps, human and alien alike. Fires smoldered in the ruins, the air thick with the stench of blood. And yet, the humans stood. They had lost nearly everything. Their numbers were a fraction of what they had been. Their weapons were shattered, their supplies gone. But when the sun broke through the smoke, they raised their battered flag on the highest rock of the ridge. They cheered, voices hoarse, broken, yet louder than the thunder of cannons. I recorded it all. My hands trembled as I reviewed the footage, the image of scarred, blooded survivors standing atop the corpses of giants, smiling as though they had achieved more than survival. And perhaps they had. Because the enemy fled. The Dominion's most advanced force had been broken, not by superior weapons, not by numbers, but by something no equation could measure. The fury of humanity. That night, as the humans buried their dead, I found myself sitting among them once again. They sang songs of the fallen, songs of rage and memory, their voices carrying into the dark. I felt a weight in my chest I could not name. Guilt, perhaps. Or shame. Or fear. For I realized then that my mission was no longer about observation. It was about survival. Not mine. The Dominion's. If my people continued to provoke these beings, if we cornered them, pushed them past the breaking point, the storm I had witnessed on Brant Hose Ridge would be nothing compared to what they would unleash upon the stars. And for the first time in my life, I wished the Council had never ordered me to watch. Because now, I could never forget. Regret. The war on Brant Hose 4 ended, though ended is too clean a word for what remained. The Dominion withdrew. Not in triumph, not even in orderly retreat. They fled. Ships that had once darkened the sky with their numbers now vanished into the void, leaving behind wreckage and smoldering silence. And the humans, those impossible, stubborn creatures, stood victorious. It was not the victory of conquerors. It was the survival of those who should have been erased yet refused to die. Their cities were ashes, their families broken, their numbers decimated. Yet when dawn rose over the ruins, they lifted their heads, blooded but unbowed, and sang. I recorded every moment. My lenses captured their faces, hollow-eyed soldiers, scarred children, medics whose hands shook from exhaustion yet never ceased working. Every image was evidence of something my people would never understand. I was supposed to bring back data, numbers, casualty ratios, tactical maps. But what I carried with me was far heavier. I carried truth. The journey home was silent. In the void between stars, I replayed my recordings again and again. I watched men and women charging against impossible odds, mothers handing weapons to sons, wounded soldiers laughing through their agony. I heard the roar of voices that refused to yield, the defiant songs echoing through smoke and ruin. I tried to analyze it, to reduce it to charts and formulas, but the truth escaped my calculations. It was not in the numbers. It was in their eyes. Humanity did not fight for territory. Not for resources. Not even for survival alone. They fought for one another. For memory. for the idea that no force in the galaxy had the right to strip them of their defiance. And in that realization, I felt regret begin to gnaw at me, because I knew what awaited me when I returned to the council. The chamber was vast, lined with towering statues of Dominion heroes, their faces carved into masks of stern perfection. The elders sat in a semicircle, their eyes cold as obsidian, their robes shimmering with symbols of authority. I presented my report. I showed them the recordings, humans standing amid rubble, bleeding yet still laughing, soldiers dragging themselves forward on shattered limbs, commanders leading charges even as their bodies burned. I told them the enemy had been driven back, not by superior weapons, but by something intangible, something my words struggled to capture. They are dangerous, I said. My voice trembled, though I forced it steady. Not because of their strength. Not because of their technology. But because of what they become when pushed to the edge. Humanity does not break. They transform. They endure. And when they fight with nothing left to lose, they are unstoppable. The chamber was silent. Then the elders laughed. Not with joy, but with the cold, derisive amusement of those who believe themselves above all others. Every species claims its uniqueness, one elder said. Every defeated enemy has sung their own praises. You are young. Impressionable. Do not mistake desperation for power. Humans are insects, another added. Loud, resilient perhaps, but insects nonetheless. A pest to be managed, not a threat to be feared. I wanted to argue, to scream that they were wrong, that I had seen the truth with my own eyes. But I said nothing. To defy the council was unthinkable. So I bowed my head, handed over my recordings, and walked from the chamber in silence. But the images never left me. I dreamed of them at night, the commander burned black yet still standing, the boy with only one arm firing until the rifle cracked in his hands, the mother whispering courage to her child before battle. I heard their laughter in the quiet of my quarters. I smelled the smoke of their burning cities in the recycled air of the station. And worse, I felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on me. The Dominion would not stop. They would see Brandt Hose 4 as an anomaly, nothing more. They would continue their expansion, their conquests, their endless hunger for control. Sooner or later, they would strike at humanity again. And when they did, when they pushed too far, when they cornered humanity once more, what I had seen on that ridge would spread like fire across the stars. Humanity's fury would not remain bound to one world. It would ignite galaxies. And my people, blind in their arrogance, would never see it coming. I live with regret because I know what is coming. Regret that I obeyed instead of warning. Regret that I watched instead of acting. Regret that I saw the truth yet could not make them believe. I regret, most of all, that when the storm comes, it will not stop with the Dominion. I have witnessed what humans become when they are broken, when they are cornered, when all they have left is each other. They do not fight merely to survive. They fight to win. They fight to end. And one day, the stars themselves will tremble when humanity's fury is unleashed in full. On that day, I will remember the ridge. I will remember the laughter through smoke, the songs through blood, the eyes that refused to yield. And I will regret more than anything that I was there to see it first.